Welcome to the Rex Andrews Show. Glad to have you with us today. If you are a first-time listener, welcome to the program. Welcome to the conversation. A couple things to ask you if you're brand new to the program. Number one, please subscribe so you get the latest episodes. And then number two, now don't forget, I'm not bashful. I will beg. In fact, I'm a well-dressed beggar. Please give us those 5 stars. If you like what we're doing, that helps us with placement in the app distribution stores. And we want to welcome back all of our existing listeners. Goodness gracious, we are so blessed. We are listened to in over 32 countries across 6 continents and over 500 cities. So we like to recognize our listeners. So today I want to welcome in to those who are listening to the show in Hilton Head, South Carolina, Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. So welcome those folks in Hilton Head. All right, so one last thing before we get on to our guest here today. Really excited about having her on the show, but please stop by the show website, rexandrewshow.com. The reason I ask you to do that is because we get to interview our guests and we learn a lot about their stories, but we can't touch it all. So we just kind of touch the tip of the iceberg. So if you'll go to the website and look up their profiles, we have profiles for all of our guests that have ever been on the show, our guests today, and then all those that are upcoming. In fact, we normally have about 50 to 60 guests that are in the queue to come up on the show. So you can take a look at people who are on up and coming on the show. So stop by the show website. All right. Well, as you know, this show is always about biographies and human stories. So interesting people doing interesting things. Got another one of those today. Pretty excited. We got another one of our friends from down under. So today, this afternoon here, it's Friday afternoon in Boulder, Colorado. But it's about noon in New Zealand where our guest is coming into. So noon on Saturday, that is. So let me introduce you real quick. Now here in the States, we would call her a mother, but down under they call them a mum. So she is a mum. So that's probably one of the most important titles and monikers she has, a wife. And then like myself, she's a grandparent. So she's a grandmother. So that's exciting. And then she's an innovator. She's doing something kind of interesting. In addition to being a music teacher, she's actually an online piano instructor. And so she's got some amazing courses. So I'd like to welcome to the show this afternoon and then tomorrow afternoon, Delwyn McKenzie. Delwyn, how are you?
I'm really good. It's just a real pleasure, Rex, to be on your show. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you. So how are things in New Zealand today? It's a Saturday afternoon down there. Is it a decent day?
Well, it's cold. We're in the middle of winter here. We're coming up to the shortest day next week. So it's cool and midwinter.
All right. So let's put some things in perspective. What's cold?
So 7 degrees was our max yesterday. We're talking Celsius, of course. We use Celsius down here. So I'm sorry, I can't tell you what that is in Fahrenheit.
That's roughly 40 degrees. Yeah, that's not cold. Come on.
Well,
it's all perspective. All right. Well, let's get on with our story today. So as you know, we tell everybody stories, and I like to tell this to people that success doesn't fall out of the sky. Okay. Now, earlier this spring, just a few blocks from where I live, there were airplane parts that fell out of the sky from a United Airlines the engine that blew up and landed blocks away. But success is not like that. It doesn't fall out of the sky and hit us. And so what we like to do on our show is to go back and learn people's stories and learn how they got to who they are today. So don't worry. I will ask you all these questions so you don't have to memorize them. So we'll fire them out. First, I'd like to know where you were born, okay? Then second, where were you raised? Because that's often different. And now, we had a guest on the show, LG Soja, who actually moved 63 times before she was 15. So that makes a big difference. We want to know a little bit about your family. So do you have siblings? Do you have siblings that survived your harassment? A little bit about your parents. Now, parental influence is something I've kind of put into 3 buckets, okay? The first bucket is the super supportive, my parents were there, they launched me into life and success. And then there's a second bucket that's somewhat of the non-participatory parents where they love their kids, were supportive of their kids, but because they were so busy eking out a living that they weren't there, hand holding the whole way. So it's sort of I'm really busy parent, but I, still love my kids. And then the last bucket's the difficult one, the bucket of strife and struggle, where rotten things were going on. So possibly abuse or extreme poverty or, different types of terrible things going on that basically motivate the kid to say, you know what, I don't want anything like that. Okay. So we'll talk about that a little bit. I'd like to know what you followed when you were a kid growing up, whether you were into sports, music, dance, piano, shoplifting. And don't laugh, I actually had a guest who was a shoplifter, a car thief by the age of 15. So we'll do that. We'll hopscotch around your education a little bit, and then we just want to look at some pivot points, on where along the path did things happen to you that made you where you are today, and I know you're doing some really innovative things for that. But before we get started, so I don't forget, there are a lot of people who play along with us on the show. Can you throw out a website or social media that people can find you, and then we'll go on with the story?
So my website is accentmusicschool.com.
Okay.
And find me there.
Okay, fantastic. All right. Well, Delwyn, let's go back to the beginning. Where were you born?
So I was born in a little country town in the middle of the Waikato in New Zealand, a place called Putaruru, and it means the home of the owl. My parents were music teachers there, and they taught all the local kids music. So it was a very small country town surrounded by a lot of dairy farms, very green, hilly. Really quite a small, insignificant town. Most people probably never heard of it.
Well, how many people lived in your town in that area?
Oh, about 5,000, I think.
About 5,000? That's still decent size. I mean, I've interviewed some was people from about 600 or 700, so that's decent size. Okay. Do you have siblings?
Yeah, I do. I was the youngest of 5.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So how many girls? How many boys?
So my older brother is the first one, and then I have 3 older sisters, and then I was the youngest. So
you were the caboose bringing up the end of the train.
Yeah, and it had some advantages, actually. They would probably agree with me, but yeah.
Okay. Well, I have 5 children, and so sometimes when you get to the end of the family, the parents are kind of worn out a little bit. So it's not as hard on the 5th one sometimes, but
I think there's some truth in that. Yeah.
Yeah.
My parents probably got a bit more relaxed by the time they got to me.
Yes. Yeah. That's how it was in my family. But my youngest brother, by the time my mother had been through, my older sister, my brother, my 2 brothers, my youngest brother had to skate. It was easy because nothing fazed them. They'd seen it all by then, pretty much. So that's great. Yep. How many years apart are your family as far as, number of your kids?
So we've got my oldest, my brother, he's 14 years older than me.
Okay.
And the next sister up, she's 4.5 years up from me. So, yeah, and the sisters went across to boarding school. And so quite a bit of my childhood was just me and my next sister up because the older sisters were at boarding school.
At boarding school.
So that kind of changed the dynamic a little bit. And sometimes I was the only one at home too. So, yeah. Okay.
So how would, if we were to throw out those 3 buckets of the parental involvement, parental support, is there a bucket of those 3 that I mentioned that you would fit in more with your family?
Yeah, interesting question that, because I had incredibly supportive parents, but they were very busy.
Yes.
So the intent was very much that they loved their kids, they wanted the best for them. I think my parents probably didn't understand much about different learning styles. There was kind of a one size fits all, we'll parent you all the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that had some challenges for some of us. And for me, I was very compliant and just went along with the crowd, really. So so I was kind of left to myself in a sense, because they were busy, and I usually did what I was asked.
Now, were you a music aficionado as a youth, or what other types of things did you do when you weren't in school?
Well, music really was the main thing. I mean, my parents, they were innovative too. Actually, one of the innovative things they did in their day was to convert a caravan and into a music studio, and they had a piano in the back of the caravan, and they would take it around all the local country schools as a studio. Of course, this is pre-internet and pre-keyboards even. There were no decent electric keyboards out there those days. So it was a pretty innovative thing to do. And sometimes I would join them on a bus to get to wherever they were teaching with my older sister. And so there was that, out and about in the community. But we were expected to do our piano practice and do our music study around the use of the piano being used for piano students. One of the things about my siblings, I probably should say, is that my older sister, Helen, was an exceptional violinist. And when I was growing up, I frequently heard about how she would get up in the morning and do 3 hours before school at the age of 8 of piano practice, and she'd come home after school and do an hour's violin practice. And I scraped through getting my hour in, if I was lucky. And so I think that was quite an influential sort of aspect actually in my story. And maybe I can talk about that a bit more.
So she was kind of the yardstick that you were held up against then, huh?
Absolutely, yeah.
Or I guess that would be a meter stick.
Well, we had yards back then, I think.
Okay. Fantastic. So music was your thing. Was it fairly rural, or were you in town where you grew up?
Yeah, we were in a town. But yeah, very close to the countryside, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So what do you remember most about your childhood? I mean, if I were just to say, hey, what are one of your best memories? What stands out?
Yeah, I think it was I thoroughly enjoyed my early childhood. I felt it was a safe, comfortable place, really.
Mm-hmm.
Home was good. My parents were often busy, so I was off reading a book somewhere or playing with my friends. I think it was a good start. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So after high school, did you go on to university, or did you go to work, or what was your next step?
So I went to high school. My parents, because it was a country town, and I didn't actually go to boarding school. My sisters all wanted me to go and live in a different city where some of them were living. So I went to high school private boarding in Auckland, which was about 3 hours drive away from our country town. And so I went to high school there and majored in music at high school, went on to university in Christchurch, because in Christchurch they had a music degree where I could learn the double bass, which is the instrument I took up during high school. I decided, because my sister was a brilliant violinist and people thought that, oh, you're her sister, you must play the violin. And no, I didn't. Well, yes, I did, but so I chucked that and gave away the violin, took up the double bass to be
double bass. Oh, wow.
Yeah, great. I'm only 5 feet, so it was hard to find a double bass that was a good fit.
Create your own identity, not get out from under the shadows of your sister then.
Yeah, it was a bit. And so I went to university, started doing my degree in double bass. I was also working for part-time at a radio station down there that I was really interested in working with. And so it was a bit of a part-time degree, part-time working at the station. And then I switched to composition, because really my thing that I loved more than anything was creating. And I really found this was my thing. Interesting about that sister, when I got married and she visited us from Germany, she said to me one day, I could never write music like you, Delwyn. And that was just an incredible moment for me, for that sister who I held in such high musical regard. For her to say that to me was incredibly helpful for me. as a person. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, that's an eye-opening moment. I mean, isn't that funny how sometimes we'll hold somebody in such high esteem, and then we find out later that they had these insecurities or they thought more of you or something. It's an amazing aha moment.
It really is, actually. And I really do look back on that as an incredibly freeing moment, actually. I'm not even sure if she's totally aware of it. I think we've talked about it since then. But yeah, it was actually a really significant thing for me.
Well, the cat's out of the bag now. That story's out there, so we'll have to see if it gets to her in the ether. So how old were you when you got married?
22.
22. Wow, fairly young.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, did you meet your husband at university or work, or how did you bump into him?
I met him through a mutual friend at the radio station. He was a good friend of one of the announcers I worked with at the station, and that was at the University Cafe. He was doing his linguistics degree, and I was doing my music degree. But we actually got to know each other when he came along to record a program at the radio station.
Okay.
And he's got a really lovely speaking voice. And so it was a Bible reading program that he voiced, and I was preparing to go on the air. So we kind of got talking about the things we were reading, and we got into discussions about it. So that was separated by triple glazed windows. Our relationship bloomed from there. He was fairly quiet, and I did all the talking, and so I didn't get to know him as quick as he got to know me. But oh my goodness, yeah, nearly 40 years later, he's an incredible guy.
Now you you expressed that you are a mother. How many children do you have?
So I've got 3 incredible young adults.
Fantastic.
I think the world of them. Yeah.
Yeah. It's mine are 18 through 26, and it's a different time in life when they're adults and they're doing their things, and they're more like a friend. You know, it's not quite as much parental type engagement. So fantastic. So after you got out of university, you were fairly young, got married. Did you go to work then, or were you a stay-home mom? What was your role at that point in time?
So when we got married, I finished my degree over that year, and then we started looking at the whole idea of working with an organization that did linguistic work and translation work in languages that didn't have an alphabet in their language. Okay. And so I was interested in this organization because they also had courses to help people who were musicians who wanted to help communities use their music to of their own music to create their own music again. So that whole area of ethnomusicology was something I was interested in. I didn't get a chance to do it as a postgraduate course, but I did get to go to Dallas a few years later and do a 5-week course on that, which helped us in the community we went to work with in Asia. So yeah. Okay. So that we started that process of going, training in that organisation and going and living overseas.
Okay. So how many places did you live overseas?
We actually lived in Malaysia, Philippines, Indonesia. Yeah, those probably the main. Oh, and yeah, that's right. Those 3.
Now, did you have your kids in tow, or was this pre-kids?
We had one child in Auckland, and then we had our second in overseas in Indonesia, and our 3rd one back here in New Zealand.
Nice. So the next pivot point in your life, as far as, I mean, music is what you do. You do teach, right? You know, on a regular basis. What was the next biggest pivot point for you?
Well, when we were in the middle of this project, one of the things that happened is our kids were attending a school in the Philippines, And as far as my personal music went, I guess we focused on my husband's work for quite a while there, the translation, the linguistics, and all of that. And one of the things that started happening when my kids were in school was that they needed a music teacher in the school.
Okay.
So I started teaching music in the school year. And they asked also if I would be interested in doing musicals at the end of the school year. They wanted some kind of Christmas musical or something.
Sure.
And so for me, it was easier to write something than to go looking for something. That's just the way we were wired, I guess. We'd been involved in some local community theatre shows before we went overseas, and so using that as a basis, my parents used to do local music shows in the town we grew up in, so that was a bit of my history as well. So picking up on that, we ended up writing about 6 musicals for the school there. And so those are have been really fun to do, because our kids were at the school, and it was a small school, and we just produced those there. But those are now online as well, actually.
Yeah. So you wrote those musicals from scratch?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Fantastic. So how much music have you written over your career?
Oh my goodness. I'm not very good at publishing things, actually. So I wrote the 6 musicals, and they're available online. But I guess I've written a lot of songs reflecting my personal faith. So yeah, I'd say a lot of personal songs, worship songs. But I've also written music for students that I'm teaching.
Okay.
Whether it's an orchestral group or whether it's my students, somebody breaks their arm, so I write a piece that'll work for the arm that's not broken, or just for the heck of it.
Oh, wow.
So I love that. I love writing for a specific need. Yeah, that's something I really enjoy doing.
Now, I don't have a musical cell in my body. I love music, but I don't have any skills. So I always have such a fascination and respect for anybody that can do one of 2 things. 1, write lyrics, and 2, write music, actual notes and things. And I've always heard, and again, I don't know, that people who are really prolific composers will actually somewhat see the music in their head. How's that work for you? Do you see it? Does it just come out?
Wow. Don't think I've been asked that question before. Sometimes I think when we were writing the musicals, I think there was, we talked about this actually, how you kind of visualize how it's going to be. You kind of visualize where the song will fit and how there's a kind of, you can see it on the stage almost. And so sometimes my husband would say, I think we need a reggae kind of style song here. This would fit here. And, another kind of, he would give suggestions, and I'd go off and think about a reggae style or whatever. We also had a bit of a discussion before we got married about how you write a song. He thinks you should write a song with the music first, and I think you should write a song with the lyrics first. So we thought, well, we'll never write a song together because we'll always be waiting for. But we ended up writing our first song together for our wedding, because he went away and wrote a little poem about us becoming the lyrics and the words, the lyrics and the music becoming one song. So I said, okay, you've written some lyrics, so does that mean if I write the music, I've won the argument? And anyway, but since then we've actually written a combination. Sometimes I would write the music first, sometimes he would write the lyrics first, and now over the years we've got to understand each other's style and work with that and be very trusting with that. And I think that's really important for a songwriter. If you're working with somebody else, there's got to be a level of trust, because you've got to be able to say, no, actually that's not going to work, we need to rework that. No. And if you're not willing to rework it, then you're not going to get a good product. It's like compost. You've got to be willing to throw things away in order to get a really good thing in the end. Yeah.
So I have to ask this, since you're one that likes to write the lyrics first, I guess.
Yeah, and writes the lyrics. I'm not great at lyrics, but sometimes I do.
Okay. So is he a poet then? Because
Oh,
music
yeah.
is just you're just a poet, right?
Yeah, he is a brilliant poet.
Okay.
Hey, I'm biased, but actually, he's just written the first draft of our story. We're writing. We hope it comes to fruition. Called "Songs on the Journey." You're the first to know about it, apart from a few family and friends. But he's written the whole first draft of our time working overseas, and we're going to include a lot of the songs that we wrote along the way as part of that.
Well, so he likes to write the lyrics first,
Yep.
and
Yep.
you like to write the music second or first. So is there ever like I don't know, is it like a conflict of, okay?
No, not really. No. So what I mean is I like to have the words first and then write the music with the words.
Okay.
But he quite likes having the music first. So
And then
that
writes the lyrics.
the lyrics to go into that. Yeah.
Fun.
But we've had to mix and match that quite a bit now.
Yeah, I've always heard, again, as I just love to listen to music and follow those. So like people that followed Prince, the pop star, the American pop star Prince, they said that you'd be in a conversation with him and all of a sudden he would just start etching out on a napkin notes and things, and he would see the music in his head,
Yeah.
And then there's another prolific artist. I don't know if you're familiar with it. He's a guitarist, American guitarist, goes by a goofy name, Buckethead. The guy has written over 3,600 songs. And he's an electric guitarist. And I'm like, some of this stuff is just amazing. And I'm like, I don't think I have a brain that could wrap my head around 3,600 songs. I mean, he's released over 350 albums, just crazy prolific.
Yeah, I don't think people like that, of course, because they're singers. I'm not really a singer, and it's there are songwriters who are not singers, and they write okay songs, and there are songwriters who, I write songs, but I don't sing, so I don't really get them out there in a sense. But the musicals was a way of getting stuff out there.
Yeah,
that worked quite well.
Well, what I like about Buckethead, he's not a singer. He just writes music. And so to be able to pull together 3,600 whatever plus tracks that are at least 3 minutes long, in music, and then to be able to remember those things, and go have a concert, and I don't think I could ever do something like that. So I just marvel at anybody that can do either lyrics or write music. I think it's an amazing talent.
It's a wonderful fun thing to have. Yeah.
What's the biggest challenge that you've ever had when you sat down and wanted to write a piece for, like you mentioned, someone who had a broken hand or something, so you're going to, for the other hand, is there something that just stands out as a big challenge that you've ever okay, I'm going to write something for this?
No, I think I just start somewhere. Yeah, I think the idea gives me the what I do. I sit at the piano and away I go. It's just that's it. I mean, I've written I used to write songs only at the piano. I used to could not do anything else. I had to sit there, get a chord going or whatever, and then write the melody. When we lived overseas, there were times we were living away in the back of nowhere in the middle of a village with no keyboard or whatever, and I started writing songs more by a melody first, and I realized that actually helped me improve my melody writing because I didn't have a keyboard with me. So I was really grateful for that experience because I thought it was a negative, but it turned out really good because I realized I had been inhibited in my songwriting by only being able to sit at the keyboard, like a guitarist sitting with his guitarist. Could he without a guitar, And sometimes I think limiting what you use is actually helpful. For example, when I was writing my piano course, I wanted to write a piece that we're only working with these 5 notes here in this hand position. And so in a sense, the limit was actually great because when you work with that limit, that's all you've got. You can't go out of that. So you create with everything you've got in that limit. And I think there's something quite helpful for that, giving a framework to how you write. Yeah.
So did you and your husband pass your gifts on to your children? Are they musical too?
And that's a really interesting story for me because I mentioned earlier about my parents being thinking that one size fits all in the way they raise their kids. One of the things that I really noticed is my three kids are so different. I realized when I was teaching them, they had such different learning styles. Dyslexia was something I didn't even know I had,
Right.
and I passed that on to my kids. But I also realized that that was one of the reasons why I got so creative at the piano, because I struggled a bit more. I found other ways to learn stuff through patterning and all sorts of other ways. So when I was teaching my first son, homeschooling him, that was fine. He didn't really want to learn piano until my second son came along, and he was dead keen. So then my first son, Fraser, he wanted to learn piano because little brother was learning it.
Right.
So my second son, Isaac, he was very good. We used the Suzuki method, piano method, where there was a lot of listening going on, and it was quite different from the traditional method that I was raised on, but it was a system that my mother was now using in her music school. So with her help and across we were living overseas at the time, she helped me with the music lessons there. And so Isaac actually went on to be a jazz pianist, and he went on to do a jazz piano degree here in
Wow.
Christchurch. And he's a fine musician. And at the jazz school, they commented that his classical background, because he'd done a lot by ear with his classical background as well, meant that he had ability to play really soft, whereas and things like that other people didn't bring when they just came from sitting at the piano and figuring things out themselves.
Wow.
Fantastic. So that was great. And my daughter, she went on to sing, and she learned double bass as well, like mum. And so they all took different journeys, and that's great. I was fine with it. I do think that learning a musical instrument really helps kids in so many different disciplines that it doesn't matter whether they turn out to be an amazing musician or not. It's still giving them a really useful discipline that is going to help them in all areas of life.
Right. Well, and it's such a creative outlet too. I mean, it's awesome. So now you still teach, I understand. Now do you teach double bass, or do you just teach piano? What all instruments do you teach?
So I teach piano and strings, basically piano, violin, cello, and double bass. I'm not taught anybody the viola, probably because I'm short-armed. But no, I do teach the others. Probably violin is the one I'm probably not teaching as much. I'll only teach a beginner to get them going, but I'm comfortable teaching the double bass and cello, and the piano. Piano is my main instrument of trade, really.
Okay. Now, I understand that you've taken your courses online. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so a number of years ago, my son actually really encouraged me. He said, "Mum," this was Fraser, my firstborn, and he's got a bit of an entrepreneurial mindset himself, I think, and we were talking about a course I'd been a day-long course I'd been at for music teachers, and listening to somebody else, and I talk about what they'd done, and I came home and I said, actually, I realized a lot of what she talked about I do in my music studio, And he said, "Mum, you could write your own curriculum." And I thought, yeah, I could. Well, I could give it a go, So that's where it began. And so I started writing, putting together a course. I loved the process. And meanwhile, Fraser went online and said, we need to write some stories around this, and we need to, get it illustrated and all the rest of it. So actually, my husband, Robin, actually wrote 2 stories based around the characters that we've got in my music book. Those books aren't even published yet, although they've been sitting waiting for a couple of years for me to finish my piano course. But they're close now, you can see on the picture that I showed you, there's my piano course.
Nice. Okay.
That's the front page there. So it's that was the beginning of it, and we got it going with my own students in my brick and mortar business, and just seeing how well that was received. Everybody really has responded well to it. And I think one of the things I really wanted to bring to that course that I didn't see in other courses was this whole thing of playing by ear as well as reading music. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have had some really bad experiences with starting piano lessons, and start with a hiss and roar, and everything goes fine for a little while, and then they hit what I see as an invisible wall, and nobody really knows why. And I think what happens is quite often a parent or a music teacher will play the music for them as they're learning the reading process, and so that they immediately default to their ears. Mm-hmm. And they learn it by ear. If they're often they're keen musicians, or they've shown some kind of enthusiasm, so they truck them off to piano lessons, and the teacher immediately goes to the reading skill, and they want to learn it by ear. So they get to a level where they can't just learn it by ear anymore, and they can't read it. And so they stop there. So what's really important, this is where the foundation my parents gave me was fantastic. My mother particularly was very particular and solid on her methods, and it was consistent with you do this, and you do this, and you learn to read it, follow the notes, and know exactly where you're up to in the music. You learn these decoding methods. But what she didn't do is really encourage the playing by ear side of things. I used to tinker away and figure that out myself. So it's the playing by ear aspect that I've brought into my course that people are loving. And I had a mum sit behind me the other day and listening as I was teaching her daughter, and we were the by ear part of the course. We were doing Old MacDonald on the black notes. And her mum said, "You're teaching her to play by ear as well as read the music." She got so excited about seeing these two things. So I teach them separately. I teach the playing by ear separately, and I teach the reading music separately, and I make them decode the music. But at the end of that session, I'll play it for them so they know what it's supposed to sound like after they've practiced it, for sure. Mm-hmm. But I just don't play it at that very first point. And that is actually a really key part of what I teach. Yeah. Oh, you got me excited about it. I'm sorry. That's
no. I had a very failed attempt to learn the piano.
Oh my goodness! Oh, confessions. Okay.
Yes, so, very, very failed attempt. Unfortunately.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Was any of that what I just said? Make any connection with you?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I had, to this day, I can't read music, and I don't know what happened. But I could do the by ear part, but then I could not translate the notes. I have been asked many, many times to be part of like church choir, and I'll just tell them I can't because I don't know how to read the notes. And so I literally, my piano career went off the rails and ended at when the Saints go marching in. I mean, it was that, it was that bad. So I think what you're doing is fabulous because I don't know. I don't know much about, music and, teaching and learning it. But I can tell you what you're talking about makes so much more sense to me because, I fell off the rails fairly quick. My career didn't last very long. Then I transitioned over to the trombone, and I was about 5th or 6th grade. And the biggest problem I had with the trombone was it was too damn heavy to carry back and forth to school. And so, I had friends that were, carrying a football home, and I was carrying trombone. So that ended that too. So, I've always been a musically oriented person, but no skills. And I can't say that I wouldn't have the skills. I just never took the time to develop them, and I didn't have the appropriate teaching for my learning style.
That's just absolutely so key. And the trombone, hey, it's a tiny thing compared to carrying a double bass around. So I don't know what the problem was. I used to carry a double bass everywhere.
You're calling me a wuss, huh? Yeah. What's your problem, man?
Okay, to be fair, the double bass is empty. So, it's big, but it's empty.
Yeah, that's funny. So no, I think that's where my guess, again, I've been a teacher in various disciplines and computers and stuff like that, and Sunday school and things like that. And a lot of times it just has to be, are you connecting with the person, with the people, the way they like to learn? I think that's what it boils down to.
Mm.
So how hard was it to put your courses together, to put them online?
Well, I first of all heard about it through the idea about it, I don't know, about 5 years ago. And because I was still teaching, I really didn't know how I would do it, because ideally to teach music, you really need a one-on-one teacher. That is really the number one way. But when we were living overseas, one of the things that came up, there were a number of people who asked me if I would teach their children piano, and I didn't have the time to do that. I actually trained my boys who were 14 and 11. I actually trained them to be my assistant teachers, and they earned a bit of money through that to get their scuba diving lessons. So that was pretty cool. But they took on some beginners and helped me there. But I was thinking of people in isolated places back 5 years ago when I was thinking about this idea. People in isolated places don't have access to a teacher.
Right.
And so my first course was actually how to teach your child the piano like a pro, because I wanted to show what I'd learned about teaching my own kids and the different learning styles, exactly what we've just been mentioning, because I really think that's so important. And how, as when we're teaching our own, we actually don't do it very well. Even music teachers don't usually do it very well. And so I wanted to give some really good helps with what I learned from learning from my own mother as a music teacher, and what I learned from teaching my own kids. And I really put everything into that course. And it was a voiceover PowerPoint, which suited my style, I suppose. I also include in there a beginner course for piano, people who want to learn to read the piano themselves, read music at the piano themselves a little bit. But it's just a guide, really, for parents who want to do that. And so that was the first course I did. And then that was while I was still developing my actual piano course that you could use for your child. So that PowerPoint over voice over PowerPoint with a few videos of what I'm doing seemed to work. Yeah.
Well, I hadn't even thought about that till you mentioned the fact that a huge need for online courses for music is for people who don't have access to, they live in a rural place and don't have access to, to courses or instructors or quality instructors. When we were raising my kids, I think 4 of them tried piano, 3 of them somewhat stuck with it. It was sort of based on who we could find local as a teacher, and that really varies from skill level to skill level. You'd have some people who are fabulous, and some, well, maybe they should be teaching fly fishing. So anyway, so how long have you had the courses online?
The first one, don't know when. The first one has probably been out for about 6 months, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, but the second one really is only recent, in the last month or so. Yeah.
Okay. So did you? It looks like you released this mostly in the heart of the pandemic, then.
Not really. Really, this one is. I mean, the pandemic's kind of almost over, isn't it? And
Yeah.
people are coming out. So I didn't really maximize that. I guess I was so busy, I didn't quite get the timing right there. Working on it on my own, I haven't really done that well, probably. But yeah, no, only just recently.
Only just recently. Fantastic. So how's it been going for that? Is it gaining speed? Are you getting a lot of online customers? How's
I
that
think
working?
it's still in very early stages.
Okay.
I did, talking about the isolated people, I got an email from a lady the other day that was really lovely, and living in Papua New Guinea and unable to have access to a teacher. I mean, of course, these days people do have access to this sort of thing with Zoom, and you know that is available far more, and there are more music teachers who are teaching actual lessons online. So I mean that whole thing, having a course that you work through on yourself is not ideal on its own. I've come to realize. So what I've included in my course is the option to get in touch with me for extra Zoom lessons. And
Okay.
also, as part of the course, people can send in like a video, and I'll give them feedback. Oh, you need to make sure your fingers are doing this, or what have you. I just send them feedback on each section. They can send me one of the pieces. So I can just say, yep, you're on track. Hang in there. Great, carry on. But anyway, she gave me lovely feedback saying that she wished she'd had this course for her 9 and 11-year-old who had kind of gone down a different track or what have you. So that was really encouraging, you know, to hear about that kind of isolation being met with the course. Yeah.
Fantastic. So what's next? What's next on the horizon?
Probably the second book. I mean, I've only done the course for the first book. So I've done the second book. I'm using the second book with my students, but probably I'd like to do that. I'd quite like to do a songwriting course, actually. I mean, I know there are a lot of songwriters out there, and probably maybe lots of songwriting courses, but maybe something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, I think being a one-man band and a very busy son who got me inspired with this, and my hubby did all the lyrics for my pieces as well, so we've got that going really well. But yeah, I'm not very techie, so I'm still in the early stages of getting this off the ground.
Early stages. Fantastic.
Yeah. Mm.
So, are you going to stick with are you going to pick up any new instruments? Are you going to stay in these lanes, or any thoughts around that?
Oh no, I'm pretty happy with the instruments I play. I think if I started all over again, I think I'd go for the cello a lot more. I love playing in the bass in an orchestra, because double basses are always valuable instruments. I played recently in our orchestra, but haven't been doing all that much because of a problem with a shoulder. But I do love playing cello. Play cello in our local church, and just really enjoy playing freely with the cello, not reading music as much. You know,
Right.
the band don't read music; they just give out chord charts. So you know, we go with the flow on that, and I love that. That's my
Nice.
thing. I
Nice.
really enjoy that. So I think if I had lots of time, I'd probably play more cello.
Okay. Well, I've got one last question. You've been very gracious in humoring me with all my silly questions. You know, there's that movie Fletch. There's a terrible line out of there that says, "There's no such thing as a stupid question. There's just stupid people asking questions." So my last stupid person asking question will be, you know, there's something we have here in the Western culture, in the world of a bucket list. Okay. And I've actually interviewed the bucket list guy. He's down under there in Melbourne, Trav Bell. Great guy, hilarious to listen to him. He's a great interview. Anyway, we all have a bucket list of things we want to do before, you know, our time on earth is done. But in anything in the world, there's always an opposite. You know, there's an opposite of things we don't want to do. And that list rhymes with bucket and starts with an F, but this is a family show, so I won't say that. So I want to know what might be an item or two that might be on Delwyn's F-it list. Now, I'll give you some ideas, you know, just while you're thinking there, because this is kind of a strange question. Not everybody tosses this out to people. So a couple items that'd be on my F-it list. I'm never going to have a collection of pet snakes. Not going to happen. I will not be eating any more sardines and caviar. Nope, not doing that. And then the number one big one, and I did an episode on this. It was a very traumatic experience. I'll never, ever do another Lakota Sioux sweat lodge. The idea of excessive heat, excessive humidity, excessive drumming, and chanting, and then a slice of nudity. No, not doing that ever again. So what might be an item or two that might be on your effort list?
Man, you really got me there. It's something that has never occurred to me, ever.
No, see, people did. Now, I'll tell you this much. The next time you hear anybody talk about a bucket list, you're going to remember this conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've got so much to be grateful for. That's all I can say. I have got so much to be grateful for. I just want to enjoy my grandchildren.
Okay.
And I just, I want to enjoy
right.
the next generation, but I can't think of anything that you.
Okay, I'm gonna poke you in the eye. You can't. I'm not letting you off the hook. That's easy. Okay. It's got to be at least one yucky food you're not interested in eating. Like, hey, I'm not going to have any tripe or cow brains or tongue or something like that. I mean, it's got to be something.
I guess I didn't like eating dog when we lived in Indonesia.
No. If you have 3 dogs over there, you're a rancher. So no, you don't.
I definitely didn't enjoy eating that. It was, and I wasn't going to eat cat. That was actually called everready in Indonesia. And no. Okay, there you go. I wouldn't.
Okay, see, fair enough.
So, okay, you found that.
Okay. One of the trendy things that they have over there in Vietnam and a lot of Cambodia and a lot of those places now are these insect cafes.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sorry, I'm not doing that.
No.
I pay someone to kill insects around my house. I'm not going to go to a place and sign up to eat them. No, thank you. So.
We have had the pet snakes. That was fun. We had a pet snake called Boaz, and Boaz, he got into some interesting places around the house. That was fun. We actually didn't mind him. Yeah, he was all right. It was a python. It's about, I don't know, not very big, but yeah.
Well, you've been a great sport. Thank you for coming on the show today. Give out your website again so people can find you.
So accentmusicschool.com.
Okay.
If anybody wants to know more about, I've got a page there for Head Start Piano. And so they can check that out. And the other course that I've got there too. I've also got a free course there for anybody who is thinking about teaching their own, but doesn't know whether they should or not. So that's what to do if you, what is it called? It's a free course there on thinking about whether you've got what it takes to be a piano teacher for your own kids. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks for coming on. You enjoy your weekend coming up here down under, and we'll call this a wrap for this episode. I always want to remind people to please stop by the show website, rexandrewshow.com, so you can get more information about all of our guests, and especially our wonderful guests here today. And don't forget, we are now part of the Daily Good Network, so a network of good shows talking about good things and good people. So until next time, we'll call this a wrap. So I will say what I say every time. Be safe, but be bold and make it a great day.